And we have heard a lot from our own clients who have said that it is sometimes a challenge, but it's not that it can't be done. And so I go back to a word that is one of my favorite words, and that's intentionality. And so I believe that the leaders who are being a little bit more intentional about, like, I've heard all kinds of things that sometimes people bring their teams together remotely and they might find a way to have happy hours or to have play video games or have a virtual baby shower or something to show that even though we're not in the office, there's still a way for us to connect. I've also heard of some leaders who say, I require my employees or my direct reports, when we have a meeting, that everybody's on camera. And so it's just little things like that of being really intentional and setting expectations about what this environment should really look like.
Well, I think it's, coming. I've heard a lot of leaders say, "Well, I communicate with my team," and it's okay. Well, how do you communicate with your team? Well, we have our weekly one-on-one. Well, that's fine, but what's actually being said during that weekly one-on-one? Is it
Hmm.
goals and KPIs and straight to business, or is it genuine human care, an actual check-in on the person, getting to know the person? I think that's another one of those kind of engagement factors, especially for remote workers. If you're not with your direct report every single day, when you have the opportunity as a leader to do a check-in, and I think more than ever, especially after seeing these numbers, there should be daily check-ins. There should be more regular check-ins. But what's actually being said, during these check-ins? Are you able to relate on a human level? Are you able to have a human conversation? Do you know your people? And I think now more than ever, it's really important as a leader to know your people, to know what's going on, to know what makes them tick. And again, that may be difficult if you're working with someone fully remote, but there's still opportunities to have those check-ins, to have those conversations, relate on a personal level, get to know them a little bit. I do think that will help in regards to engagement, especially for the remote workers that may feel a little disconnected from the rest of the team.
Right. Absolutely. Well, the good news is that the article talked about some specific ways that leaders can respond to some of these challenges. And so one of those ways was focusing on organizational culture. Now, as we know, Brian, trying to change a culture is very challenging, and that's organizationally. However, and I was just talking to a team of leaders about this last week, there is opportunity to create your own culture within your team. Of course, we want to make sure that our culture aligns with whatever the organizational culture is. But if you feel like there's some challenges within the culture, there's a way to actually create your own culture on your team and setting expectations, being intentional, involving people so that you know that we have a collaborative culture. But one of the things that this article said was, especially in hybrid environments, connection takes planning. So making sure that you're not only connecting with the people, but you're offering people frequent feedback so that they can feel connected. And when we say feedback, both praise as well as constructive feedback, and having what you just said about that human care, having meaningful interactions so that people probably already feel sometimes a little disconnected depending on what kind of role you're in and what you do and all that kind of stuff. But how can you make every single interaction meaningful?
Well, I love that. I love making every interaction meaningful. And I would also say, in regards to feedback, I've always said feedback is a two-way street. But also,
Mhm.
as a leader, what are you doing with that feedback? Are you asking for it and then just kind of intaking it, but really not acting on it? Or are you actually asking for feedback and then putting that into action? And I think that's important as a leader. That is important for your employees to see that their feedback is actually being put into action. The other thing I would say there, from a leadership standpoint, in regards to increasing engagement, setting clear expectations. Now more than ever, employees want to know what they're expected to be doing. They want to be able to have goals. And I think a lot of leaders don't realize that or don't think that's the truth. But we've seen many, many surveys, many, many reports and articles say that that is the truth. That in 2025, employees want clear expectations. And then the last thing I'll say, and this is something that I've talked about many, many times, but provide developmental feedback, provide growth opportunities, provide training, provide mentoring, provide coaching. If you are giving your employees the opportunity to train, to grow, to upskill, they're probably going to want to stick around. They're probably they're going to be more engaged within the organization because of that training that they're getting, or maybe that mentor that they talk to every week, or that coach that they have. That's guiding them. So I think being able to, set those clear expectations, provide development, and then again, feedback is a two-way street. If you're asking for the feedback, make sure you're putting that into action.
Well, Brien, obviously, sharing a little bit about this article that we read, that's exactly, so the first was the organizational culture, and then it was transparency, leadership transparency, which connects to what you said about setting expectations. But this was about the why. People want to know the why. In order to feel engaged, it's important for me to know exactly what's going on, exactly why it's going on, exactly how it's going to impact me, and also to be included in that process as well. And then the third piece was what you were just talking about with development. And that was that people want the tools to enable success in staffing levels that promote sustainable work. So being able to identify what, even if there's a situation where there's layoffs, or even just there's no layoffs, but people have left and you're having some challenges with filling positions, then maybe there's an opportunity to identify, well, what are the resources that we need to change? What are the resources that we need to add? What are some adjustments that we need to make within the team so that people feel like they're still getting what they need, even if there's limited resources from a talent standpoint? And then the last thing was around just performance management, of being able to give people autonomy so that people can feel like they are a part of something, but they also have increased autonomy, because they tended to have that during the pandemic. Like, you couldn't help it because everybody was working from home. And so what this article talked about was that many employees learned the value of increased autonomy, which makes them feel great and actually helps for people to actually create more work because they have a little bit more autonomy.
Yeah, and I would say, as a leader, you should be asking your employees, what's one thing I can do to make your work easier or more meaningful? It's a very simple question, but something like that, at least if somebody asked me that, I would think, okay, this person genuinely cares, right? This is somebody who is invested in me, who wants to see me grow. So I think just asking those simple questions, will increase engagement, should increase engagement. I think this is, I'll be honest, Indor, I think this is an alarming article for leaders, but this is something that can be fixed. This is something that just takes a little more time. I think, we are still kind of early into this hybrid. We're now introducing tools like AI into companies and new technologies every single day, and new platforms. And I think there's a learning curve for leaders that obviously trickles down into employees. And I think together we'll be able to figure this out. But I do think it's going to kind of somewhat get back to the basic human levels of having conversations, communicating, collaborating together. All of that, it sounds easy, but it's not. But
Yeah.
I think if we do that a little bit more, that will help increase engagement levels. And some of these numbers that we'll see, that we're currently seeing on articles like this, will.
Yes. Well, I know we could probably talk about this forever. I think as we sum this up, the biggest priority and the biggest elements to think about is, how can I focus on being a little bit more intentional about connecting with my people? And, we have a newsletter that's coming out in just a few weeks. And the name of that is Lead the Moment. And the reason why it's called Lead the Moment is because when you are in the moment, it's so important as a leader to really pay attention to all of these things that we've talked about, so you can figure out how to make an adjustment for your team. And sometimes, and I know I'm talking to myself, for those of you who are listening, sometimes we get so busy that it feels like we just can't do it all. And so, but we have to remember that it's people first. Without our people, there's not much that we can do. So just changing and reframing that situation where we focus on the people, and then all those other great things will come. Brien, thank you so much for such a great conversation. Perhaps we should circle back on this at some point to see what other research has been found by the end of the year. Hopefully it's gotten better.
I can't wait. I'm looking forward to coming back. And I'll just say this last thing, Andorra, for everyone. Remember, engagement is contagious, but
Mm,
disengagement is also contagious. As a leader, you set the
yeah,
tone.
you set the tone. Well said, my friend. So here's the bottom line: disengagement isn't just an HR statistic, it's a leadership challenge. And the way we as leaders communicate, how we coach, how we give feedback, it's one of the most powerful tools to really shift everyone's experiences. When feedback is consistent, transparent, and growth oriented, it creates connection and also clarity for our people. Again, I am Andorra Hinton, CEO of Willow North Growth Partners, and thank you, Brien Piotrowicz, for my colleague, for joining me today. Thanks so much for joining us. And remember, every conversation you have this week is a chance to move someone from disengaged to engaged. So let's lead with clarity and purpose, and we will see you on the next episode of What's in the News. Thank you.